All right, so for now, let's have the profile retrieve a particular user by its ID, right? And we have their IDs here. If we do, there we go. So we have Dan, we have Frank. So there's the ID for Frank, right? It'll give us a chance also to play around with retrieving a user by their ID. So to do that, let's first go on the server. Let's implement that on the Node.js side. Here we go. First, we'll have to implement it at the model level. So here's the model. Here's the model. We have create user, find all users. We also need one that says find user by ID, right? So let's do that. So let's do a function, find user by ID. And here's our user ID. And this can return user model, right? And Mongoose already implements a function that if you just pass it the ID, it'll return the object with that particular ID, right? It's such a common use case, right, that they did a syntactic sugar. So find by ID. That's part of the Mongoose API. And you just pass it the ID. There's ID. And it'll return it as a promise. Now that we implement it on the model, we need to expose it in the service, right? So it will be a get. And here you can provide the ID, so user ID here. So this will be find user by ID. And implement it as an endpoint from the request and the response. And we can parse out the user ID from the parameter as a path parameter. Right? So we can pass it and we say, OK, well, I can retrieve the ID. I'm deliberately changing its name so that you don't make a connection that it has to be the same, right? So we can parse it out. We can, from the request params, parse out its user ID. And now that we have the ID, we can use the model to retrieve that particular user. Right, so we can say user model dot find. Oh, did we not expose it? We must have forgotten to expose it. Let's go back to the model, and this find user by ID, we need to put it in the map, right? So that we can see it outside. Okay, so there it is. So find, there it is. Find user by ID, right? And we can pass in the ID. This is going to then receive here the actual user. And we're going to send as a response. If you know the object is JSON, right, it's cheaper to use JSON as a response. Instead of response.send, send is very generic. Right? It needs to figure out what it is that you're sending, and then it has to figure out what MIME types to use. If you already know it's a JSON object that you're sending back, JSON already has that pre-configured, the MIME type and everything. So here we're sending back the user. Okay. So from the client side, we can do the mirror image from Angular. If we go to the service, from the service, user service client, there it is, we can create the mirror image here. So this would be find user by ID. And this takes in as argument user ID. And we can copy this, and it would be the same URL. The difference is that this would be user followed by the user ID as a path. And presumably that would come back with that one user. Okay? Now from the profile component, we can use the find user by ID, and we can pass as argument an ID. We don't have an ID. I'm going to hard code it for now, all right? But certainly we can find out what that is. So I'm just going to grab here Frank. Right, I'm going to pass as an argument, and then I'm going to set the user here. Now the user object only had these fields, just first name, last name. So I'm going to add here. This is the model on the client side, right? A class that allows me to notice that I only have first name, last name, and email. But on the data, I only have username and password, so it wouldn't be showing anything, right? So I'm going to put here at least username, string, and password, string. And here on the database level, we're just going to leave it like that. Now on the templates for the profile, Let's render the username as well. So I only had first name, last name, and email. So I'm going to add here username. So username, and this will be username. Okay. All right. So let's refresh. I probably need to restart the server. Let's see the server. Is this a server? Yes. Let's restart the server. Let's see. Make sure that we are hitting this user by ID. Okay. And let's hit the server console. Do we have? Wait. Let me see. Do we have localhost 4000 API /user/ and the ID was, what was the ID? That's the ID. Is that not the get? Did I misspell it here? Find user by ID, API user. Did I misspell it? 4000 API user, the ID. API user, user ID. That returns all of them, right? No, that's not create. Why are you even calling create user? Create user. Create user is a post. I'm not sending a post. That was weird. Oh, wow. Why is it calling create user? Why are you sending create user? I'm not posting. Create user. Create user. Do I have elsewhere something declared? On the server? API, session, no. On the service, there's get, find by ID, user profile. I'm just going to remove you for a second. You're worrying me. Okay, this find all user, that makes sense. Okay, there we go. And if I do it with an ID, okay, it's find by ID, and it returns that one user, Frank. Yeah, that's what I want. So we go back here, and if we refresh, there's find user by ID, and there's Frank, right? That came back from the server. Not quite sure why the post was being invoked. All right, I'll debug that, and I'll post it. I'll push this latest data for you to use. All right, awesome. Thank you.